Welcome to Pixel Realms, the podcast where two geeks dive headfirst into the gaming multiverse. They're basically like Gandalf in a headset, minus the wisdom and magic. So, grab your snacks and level up your patience. Pixel Realms, where the pixels are real, but the knowledge, not so much.
Hello and welcome to Pixel Realms. This is episode 4, Pixels versus Realistic Graphics. I'm Joe.
And I am Mark.
And Mark has some news to share within the gaming community today.
So yesterday was a Warcraft, Direct to celebrate 30 years of Warcraft. And the first piece is very minor, but, good for fans. They are releasing or have released a Warcraft battle chest. So I believe it's all of the Warcraft, the original Warcraft games, the RTS games, not, World of Warcraft or anything. The other part of the news, this is the part that I wanted to mention. They have announced that they are releasing Mr. Pandera Classic. The reason why this is news, semi-news, is it infuriates me. And at the same time, I think Blizzard's genius, because a couple years ago, they started with WoW Classic. They re-released the original game with some slight modifications to make it more modern, but it was the original stuff that got you to level 60, the original raid. People were happy, people were excited, people were playing it. Cool, awesome, great. Then they came out with Burning Crusade Classic, which was the first expansion. And then they came out with Wrath of the Lich King Classic. And then Cataclysm Classic. And now Mr. Pandera Classic. They are essentially re-releasing their game, and people are basically paying into it. And
I'm shocked.
It's mind-blowing to me that this is a game that you've played, if you're a WoW player, and you've played the original games, and you played the original expansions, that you're like, yeah, you know what? That sounds like a great idea. I want to play Mr. Pandera again. So I'm just going to pay into this. I think Classic, I don't play the Classic shit because I've already lived through that. I don't need to relive it again. So I don't know if it costs anything to actually buy the version of Classic, but I know you have to have an active World of Warcraft subscription to play it. And there are people who are paying that $15 a month to play Classic that aren't even playing retail. Mm-hmm. So you are still buying into that. And to me, I think it's mind-blowing that Blizzard is basically reselling their game and people are buying into it.
Blizzard's the best at doing that, though.
It's just crazy to me. Mr. Pandera at this point is, I don't know quite how old it is, but it's got to be at least 10, if not 15 years old. Mm-hmm. And you're paying into a 15-year-old freaking expansion, not to mention just a couple months ago, before the release of the new expansion, they did something called Mr. Pandera Remix, where you essentially played Mr. Pandera all over again, and now they're releasing a classic version. So I'm trying to figure out what the fuck is going on and why the fuck people want this.
Well, so I don't know a whole lot about WoW. I haven't played WoW like you have, but I have a heart when it comes to the RTS of Warcraft. So Warcraft 3 was I think actually Warcraft 3 was the first RTS I ever played. Maybe Red Alert, but go ahead.
And here's the thing. Mm-hmm. It's Warcraft remastered, Warcraft 2 remastered, Warcraft 3 reforged, which I think is all of Warcraft 3.
Yeah.
The battle chest is only $40.
That's not bad, because
I
think the reforged of 3 was like 35 or something. I had bought it when it first came out, but I actually refunded it because they had it. If everyone followed the launch of the reforged, it was a disaster. They changed so many of the mechanics of the game, and it pissed me off. And it's like, I ain't fucking playing this game anymore. So it was one of the. I was surprised because Blizzard Activision's not a whole big on the refund system, but because it was so bad, they did auto refunds, which is always a bad sign when game companies do that. I'm guessing.
Oh yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah, well, just overall, Warcraft has a lot of special memories to a lot of people, myself included, Joe included. $40 for all of the original games remastered, I think is a good deal. So they did something right there. Like I said, it's just the World of Warcraft shit that just blows my fucking mind.
It'll be interesting to see if eventually World of Warcraft will end. There will be an end. There's an end to every game out there. EverQuest was on top for the longest time, and then when WoW came out, they succeeded that. So the question is, who is going to be the next one to take out the big MMO market?
I mean,
And
it's here's the thing.
people
Like,
call me crazy,
honestly,
but it will happen one day.
yes and no. I mean, what's going to end WoW is the player base dying, and the fact is the player base is stronger than it's ever been with the new expansion.
I know it's fine now,
So-
and it's probably gonna be fine for another decade at least. But there will be a game that comes out, whether it be whatever VR, AR, or something like that takes down WoW. It will be some big new
World of Warcraft 2 will take down World of Warcraft. You are
probably
absolutely right.
In other
that's the
news,
unfortunate. Yep.
now I'm fairly certain you have played Mortal Kombat some point in your life, probably many different versions.
Yes.
Okay, well.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if you played the new Mortal Kombat 1 that came out, I think it was last year.
I have not.
I played it, I borrowed a PS5 from a friend, so I got to play it on his system. And it's pretty cool. It's Mortal Kombat. It's new age Mortal Kombat. It's what you expect. Gore, good graphics, and mechanics, whatnot. But the thing that's interesting about Mortal Kombat is over the past several versions of their game, they've introduced characters that have nothing to do with the Mortal Kombat world. If you remember back in when was it, like, whatever, I don't remember what version it was, but they because they've changed the version numbers now, they've gone back to 1 instead of going.
Yeah, I fucking hate that.
So I don't know what version we're at anymore, but anyways, in this new version, Mortal Kombat 1, they have introduced Ghostface from the Scream series. So we've had what, I think Jason was in one, Freddy was in one. What's the guy's name?
Omni-Man.
What was it?
Omni-Man from the
yeah,
Invincible series.
I think Leatherface was in it as well.
I think so.
So
the Ninja Turtles.
The Ninja Turtles, yeah, I forgot about that too. Which were pretty cool.
Injustice.
Yeah, they weren't bad. I like the Ninja Turtle one. That wasn't bad.
Nope.
But it's interesting. RoboCop, yeah, and Terminator,
and the Terminator. Yep.
What's interesting about the Scream one is not a spoiler, kind of a spoiler, I guess. If you've watched the Scream movies, you find out who the killer is, of course, at the end of every movie. And what they done I think was kind of cool in this is, of course, they introduced Ghostface, but there's one identity, which from my understanding is from the Scream series, but there's two secret identities that you have to do the challenges to get to unlock who they are.
Okay.
So,
I mean,
it kind of takes it from the movie a little bit, where it's special and secret, and you have to figure it out.
Okay. I mean, that's kind of neat. I wish I was a bigger fighting game fan.
Me too.
I loved Soul Calibur. I didn't play the newest one that had come out a little while back, but I had always loved the Soul Calibur series. That was the only gaming series, the only fighting game series that I would kind of go out of my way to try and play. Even being an anime fan and a fan of Dragon Ball, I couldn't make myself play the Dragon Ball fighting games, even though I'd heard they were good. So, I genuinely just don't play, the Street Fighters and the Mortal Kombats. So
I'm just so bad at the combos.
Yeah.
I can't remember, the finishers and all that. I find the easy ones, left, right. Left, right, B.
I tried so hard. I even bought a fight stick. Your cousin tried to get me into fighting games so badly, and I legitimately tried, but I just couldn't get it. And it wasn't fun. It wasn't enjoyable to me. It's kind of the same reason why I don't play Souls games. I was more frustrated than I was enjoying it. And when you play video games, I like to play video games to either have fun or to relax or to be immersed, not agitated.
Every game you play calls for you, depending on how the gameplay is. And that brings us into our main story today, which is pixels versus realistic graphics. So pixels pixels in terms of Stardew Valley, realistic in terms of Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2, in terms of the
Mhm.
graphics overall. Not the feel of the game or the story so much, but more of just the
The
graphics,
overall look,
the
yeah, the
artifact
overall look,
arts. Yeah. hmm
the look,
And
the design, etc.
yeah, so Mark and I have different takes on this because, from my understanding, you are more into the pixel graphics.
I enjoy more of the pixel games, at least now as of late. I appreciate realistic graphics. To me, it's about the game, though. It's got to be a game that I want to play. I don't give a shit about the graphics if it's something I want to play. If I want to play Red Dead Redemption, then yes, I want my game to look like what Red Dead Redemption looks like. But especially now, lately, I play a lot of sim type games like your Stardew Valleys, where you're just kind of crafting and chilling and just vibing. And those kind of graphics are fine, and they always find a way to make them still look fairly impressive, even though they're going with less pixels, less intensive graphics.
And I think what the pixel games do really well is they have major replayability.
Oh
Major
yes.
replay. I
Oh
think
yeah.
of like Minecraft, for example. Minecraft is a pixel game.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's mods and whatnot. You can make it to look a little bit more, change the art style a bit. But at the end of the day, Minecraft, even nowadays, which I don't know, Minecraft's been out forever now,
Oh yeah.
and there are millions and millions of people that play that game every single day, and they don't care about
Mm-hmm.
the graphics. They like the style, they like the artwork. And
Yep.
one of the other big things about the pixel kind of graphics is that it can be played on pretty much any device known to mankind.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the early days with Nintendo, you know, and Sega and Sony. The pixel graphics were there because the power behind the systems were not. And even today, Nintendo, we talked about this on the last episode, Nintendo is always sticking to the same thing, which is producing products that aren't high end so that the lower income people or who aren't as gifted can afford it and still have a grand time playing their titles.
Oh yeah. I mean, another game that's like Stardew Valley, like Minecraft. There's Terraria. These kind of games, they get ported everywhere because they're not high intense graphically. I've seen them on cell phones. I've seen them on the Switch, the PlayStation 1, or the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, all the Xboxes, this, that, and beyond. My youngest son has 3,400 some odd hours in Terraria, played it that much. So there's tons of replayability in those games, where a lot of the more realistic, graphic intense games, a lot of the times they're telling you a story. Maybe they have one or two endings. Maybe they do have multiple endings, but it's kind of like the replayability just a lot of the times isn't there, like with the, I guess you could say, the lower res graphic games, like your Stardew Valleys, like your Terrarias, where it's essentially, go through the world, build this, do that, and then go one way. And then once you're done doing everything, you start a new world and you start over.
And the thing is, like, we're not saying that there isn't replayability in the realistic graphic games at all. Like, you think of racing games, any of the racing, Forza and Gran Turismo, they have tremendous replayability. Different tracks,
Mm-hmm.
different cars, online gaming, challenges, whatnot, right? So there is endless potential there.
Oh
But
yeah, I
it
mean,
seems like the Pixel games do cater to a different fan group more so than the realistic graphics. Hades, what do you consider Hades to be?
oh, it's definitely not. It's definitely not realistic. I really don't count it as pixel either. I guess theoretically. I guess there's probably like a third tier of like a more of like a cell shading. It's CGI, but not quite full on
hmm
CGI. But it's not quite realistic, but it's not. quite pixely either. So I guess there is kind of a third bracket there. But yeah, Hades is definitely not realistic graphics. I've seen it can be played on. I don't think it can be played on mobile, but I've seen it on the Switch. I've seen it on the PlayStations and whatnot. So it's definitely able to be played on slightly lower res things. The Steam Deck, you can play it on the Steam Deck, no problem.
Is
So
what was the first cell shade? It would be like Borderlands, probably.
Borderlands stands out, definitely. I don't know if it's the first one, but it's definitely one of the ones that I think really I remember it being specifically that way. So I'd say that's a pretty good guess. I don't really know what the first early ones is, but I'd say Borderlands is probably pretty close.
I remember playing a Ninja Turtle game that was cell shaded, and it took me a while to get used to it because I just, even to today, I don't really care for cell shading games. Like, some games are fine with it. There's an indie game, I can't think of the name off the top of my head right now, but I absolutely loved. It's fantastic. That it was cell shaded, and I was able to get around that in my head just because of the experience I had with the controls, the music, the story itself was really, really cool. But
It's been around longer than I thought. I just looked it up, and even games like Jet Set Radio that was out back in the Dreamcast was considered cell shaded.
Yeah, so that would mean Crazy Taxi probably then too, right?
Beautiful Joe on the GameCube. Okami is a really beloved game that's been out a long time and has been ported to a lot of things. So yeah, cell shading's been out quite a bit longer than I thought. I don't know when exactly it came out, but it's been out a lot longer than I thought.
So I wonder if that was the bridge from pixel to the realistic graphics, because they didn't have the horsepower then, but they were able to find a way to make the graphics smoother, so take a different approach.
Yeah, I think so. I think that probably was like the bridge, because I'm seeing 1997. There was oddly enough, a Goosebumps game.
Game?
Yeah, Goosebumps. That was one of the earlier cel-shaded games, and then Jet Set Radio in 2000. It gets a lot of the credit for being one of the earlier cel-shaded games. So it's been around since at least the 2000s, like 2020, or not 2020, 2000 even.
Didn't they just didn't they release a Jet Set Radio recently, like a new one or something?
Yeah, they're like, I don't know if it's just a remaster or if it's just a whole new game. But I know it started being more prominent with the Dreamcast, with the PlayStation 2, with Sly Cooper and Jak and Daxter.
Sly Cooper, yeah.
A lot of those games had a lot of cell shading. Even the newer Zelda games are more cell shaded. They're definitely not pixely.
Yeah,
they started pixel. They definitely started as a pixel game, but then when they came to the newer consoles, they started becoming more cell shaded. So
that's interesting to think about, because, like I was saying earlier, like, I'm not a huge fan of cell shade, but now that you brought up titles, I played a handful of those titles.
It's kind of honestly, it's kind of surprised me that it's gone under the radar so much that I didn't even consider it, when really it's just as prominent as pixels and realistic games. A lot of the games I played, Persona 5 is one of my favorite RPGs of all times. That's a more cel-shaded style. And so honestly, I underestimated just how prominent cel shading is in gaming.
Yeah, I wonder if they take the cel shade and they feel the interest is like the comic book people.
I don't know about that. I think it's legitimately just an art style. I don't think it's so much because of comic books, but it gets very closely associated with Japanese anime. So there might be a lot more Japanese roots to it. I'm trying to do a little bit of research while we're recording to just have a little bit more to add to it information wise, but too long, didn't read. But yeah, Dreamcast, looks like Dreamcast really gets kind of the nod. Jet Set Radio is definitely one of the games that gets really the credit for it.
It's really interesting
Zelda,
because
Legend of Zelda Wind Waker,
oh yeah,
2002. Okami originally came out in 2006. Some of these games are really prominent, really beloved, and like really big major titles that were cell shaded, that we kind of, not so much that we forgot about it. We didn't forget about the game. We forgot about the style of game.
yeah. That's a huge style. It's interesting to see, and that's something that's really cool about doing these kind of podcasts. Is as you have these conversations, you start coming up with things that you didn't initially expect to have a conversation about.
Yeah, you know what it is it looks like a lot of it started in film animation, because I'm looking all the way back in 1986. The Great Mouse Detective, Oliver and Company, The Little Mermaid. There was a bit of cell shading in that. DuckTales, a lot of this stuff. Tom and Jerry, Tarzan. I'm looking at stuff all like the late 80s, early 90s that had cell shading in it. So it looks like it got its start more on the animation studio, and then was kind of developed into gaming, brought into gaming. So that's maybe why we kind of skipped over it, because pixel gaming itself has, I guess, always been in gaming. If you think about it, pixel's probably been around the longest, because your NES, your SNES, those older systems, a lot of those games, the technology wasn't there, so the pixel graphics were the be all, the end all. And then once these higher res computers come out and they start making computers that are more capable for gaming than just being business computers, and you start getting the graphic cards, you start seeing the more realistic stuff.
Do you feel that with a pixel or cell shade, you can get involved deep within a story like you can with a realistic graphic game?
I believe so. I just think it really just depends on the game. Realistically, if you are playing an RPG, if it's a good RPG, it doesn't matter what the graphics are. It doesn't matter if there's voice acting. It doesn't matter if it's all just text. It depends on how well the story is written. I think of Disco Elysium. It's not a pixel game, but it's just more of a cell shaded style. Even before they came back and re-recorded like all the voice acting for in the last year or two, I think, is when they re-released it with like all voice acting.
Yeah,
it's a lot of people say it's one of the best story games, in a long time. There's a lot of those kind of games, and the graphics really had nothing to do with it. It was about the story. So that's why I've always said graphics don't matter to me. If I want a chill vibe game that I'm in the mood for just like crafting and that kind of stuff, I'll play like your Stardew Valleys. But if I want like a deep enriched story, I'll lean towards more JRPG focused stuff. So
what do you think would be more ideal for multiplayer gaming?
Cell shaded.
Cell shade, interesting.
Cell shaded, honestly, because pixel would work just fine. I don't see a lot of the type of games that really need multiplayer. A lot of the type of games like your Stardew Valleys, it's cool that you can have a friend join you on the farm and play the game with you, but it's not a real necessity. But when you're talking about like your shooters, your Call of Duties, and a lot of those other games that have the more realistic graphics, that needs to be a thing. But I like cell shaded better because you can never know who has what kind of computer, right? Like I have a pretty decent computer, but you may have like a supercomputer. So you might be able to run everything on high res, the highest graphics, but maybe I have to go, depending on the game, maybe I have to go to low settings because my computer can't handle the same graphics, so cell shade is kind of like a fine middle point where both of us can probably run it at the higher resolutions and get just as much enjoyment out of it. But there's nothing wrong with realistic graphics, of course, for multiplayer, and I think that's where it is. I think it's more realistic graphics and maybe cell shading are probably the best for multiplayer, in my opinion.
I've always really just been drawn to the realistic stuff. I think about the early days of my gaming. The more realistic, the more I got excited and involved with it. But then there was that switch with me because early on I was playing, the more realistic looking stuff, and then I got sucked into Animal Crossing on the GameCube. And of course that's not pixel, it's not cell shade, it's kind of cartoonish, it's kind of middle ground in there.
Yeah, it's a bit more blocky. It's a bit. It's kind of like a more refined Minecraft style graphics.
Yeah.
So you could kind of lean towards the pixels a little bit.
You can. Yeah.
I'm just looking at my Steam library right now of games that I have installed, and it's a pretty mixed bag. Hades 2 is more cell shaded than it is realistic or pixel. Ready or Not that we play a lot together is more realistic. I'm playing obviously stuff like World of Warcraft is more cell shaded-y because it's more cartoony. But like Throne and Liberty is a little bit more realistic. Baldur's Gate 3 obviously looks a lot more realistic than whatnot. But then I have games like Stardew Valley and Sunhaven and those kind of games that are installed. Coral Island, those are all pixely. But then there's also you look at the simulator games. I have a lot of sim games installed, and a lot of them had that kind of that mix where they're not quite realistic, but at the same time they're definitely lean more towards the realistic. So that I would kind of put them in the realistic graphic, in bracket because they try to make the people look as realistic as possible. Granted, they use a lot of the same textures and a lot of the same models over and over again because these sim games are coming out quickly and they're coming out cheaply.
Speaking of that, yeah, I'm sure you're aware of this, but some of our listeners may not be. But like one of the things that was unique about Super Mario back in the day is that they didn't have a lot of space to work with for the artwork. So they actually took, for example, the cloud. It's also a bush within Mario. It's just different color. Cloud's white, bush is green, and they did that with a lot of pieces in there because of the limitations. And still came out with an amazing product that's played by, thousands of people, probably daily today.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a beloved title for a reason, right? And that one's another one where it's like they made a game based on what they had at the time for the technology at the time. And they reused a lot of assets because they were trying to make it, they were trying to not break the bank while making the game. So yeah, I mean, you look at it, and that's what I mean by it looks like pixel gaming's been around the longest because that's what they had to deal with and what they used back in the day. And obviously, it's grown immensely to the point where, it's a full process of computer rendering and CGI and just building a model and making it look lifelike and move like a person and talk like a person.
How much more complex gaming is today.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
And even think about, I'm sure pixel games are and shell shade are harder to work on today than they were back before because things are more complex. But think about you're playing. I'm just gonna say Dragon Age because that's just popped in my head right away. But you're walking through this entire world, and of course all the trees are just plumped. They're recreated trees, and there's whatever 20 different designs, and they just plop down a couple of them. But then they have to remake entire castles. They have to have hundreds of different kinds of rocks, probably different mountains change, different types of armors and clothing. It's not like it's just a new paint color on it. It's a complete different design with different texture. Might move a little different because it's made out of leather versus cloth. So there's so much more complexity when it comes to today's gaming. Probably even more so with the realistic graphics, but definitely with the pixel stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, everything's evolved. You look at Even Minecraft. If you look at how Minecraft started to where Minecraft is, not even that. And that's not even involving the modding community, because that's a whole nother can
Oh
of
yeah.
worms. That's another whole show in itself, is talking about modding and gaming and all that it does. Sometimes you can play a whole new game just with mods,
It's
and
one of those
Minecraft's a very good example of it.
it's one of those things that makes me just wish when I was younger, I stuck with some of the things I was learning. I was learning Blender and making 3D models, and I was like, yes, this isn't gonna go anywhere. And then you fast forward to today's world, and you're like, oh man, I could have modded all this crap had I taken the time to learn how to do this,
Mhm.
15 years ago.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's always the case for me, that I feel like I was born easily 10 years too early,
Hmm.
and I missed a lot. I missed out on a lot. I look at, even today, my youngest son is in a class has a class that's teaching Unity,
Oh yeah,
and
nice.
I would have killed for that.
Yeah.
I would have killed for that. And yeah, it's crazy how much things have evolved in even just the last 10 years. You kidding? Like, let alone 20, 25, 50, 30, etc. Like, even just the last 5 to 10 years, the evolution has been almost absurd.
When you look at like what Epic's been doing with the Unreal Engine and making things easier for developers to work with environments. Like they already have a lot of preset stuff. They already have mountains and bridges and whatever it be, and you just plop them in, and you can make a quick, relatively quick Unreal game. That's very basic in nature, but it can be accomplished by individuals. Think about all the indie games out there. A lot of them was one person studios working on these titles.
Mm-hmm. And now you see a lot of these indie studios are one or two man shows, and they're putting out like amazing games.
And I think
I
that's what
think Stardew. Look at Stardew. I think it's one guy.
one dude, and he said that he wants I just read an article not so long about him, and he said he's very passionate about the product, and that's why he's going to hold on to it and not sell out, and just keep on adding to it because he just does it for the fans. He does it for himself.
Yeah, I mean he's still, even though he said he was done updating Stardew, he still puts out little fixes and updates every now and then while he's working on a new game that a lot of
Hmm.
people are excited for. So
And I think
and that's one guy.
that's why us as gamers we get so pissed off when a AAA title comes out and it's buggy as hell, and there are double-digit figure people working on it, high-end game developers and audio work, whatever it be, working on these titles, and they come out just a disaster. Meanwhile, some dude is working on this in his bedroom for, a year, comes out with a higher quality product than the billions of dollars that this game studio put into a title.
Yeah, absolutely. It's mind blowing to me. That's why I have such an issue sometimes with early access and that kind of stuff, because they no longer, they still manage to put out a buggy game, and they also expect you, the player, to beta test it for them.
Yeah. And so,
And then they slap $60 on it and say, "Gimme."
yeah, give me the money. Give it to me now.
Yeah,
And
it's crazy.
yeah. So let's go back a little bit. You talked
Hmm.
about you being big into pixel games, and for me, I've talked about the realistic. And that's my passion is more of the realistic graphics. I feel like I get more engulfed within the story. I feel like I'm there playing, Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption, and you feel like you're in the Midwest playing The Last of Us. You feel like you are one of the two characters, Joel, walking around there, and zombies coming after you. That's what gets me more involved with the titles. God of War 2018, one of the few games that I was on the edge of my seat so much about the story. And, you get a little bit of that something in your throat, that moment where you're about to cry, but you're sucking it back.
Hmm.
Those get me in those kind of games. Whereas I don't think I have ever gotten that way with a pixel or shell shaded game.
And that's fair. And I don't think I haven't too many times, except for there's been quite a few JRPGs from the older days, like Final Fantasy VII, like Final Fantasy IX. Those are some of my favorite games of all time, and the story was deep enough that, even if I didn't get teary-eyed, I was invested and I wanted to know what happened next, and I needed to have resolution or to what was going on.
And the thing is, go ahead.
It boils down to the story, though. It really doesn't matter with the graphics, because I don't care what the characters look like. If the story's doing such a good job of telling that story, it's gonna bring me in. Just as much as like sitting down and reading a book, because that's what you're doing. You're reading a book. You don't have pictures usually in front of you. You don't have graphics in front of you. So that's what a lot of these games are, is just, picture books.
And that was going to be my point, actually, is that my wife, she's a big audiobook person. She's a like actual physical book reader, but she listens to a lot of audiobooks nowadays. And she's very good on her mind converting the things she's reading or listening into a visual image for her to believe she's there, where I'm not. And we actually had this conversation many times where, as a young kid, I didn't get read to. My mom, my dad, no one read to me books. The only time I'd ever have a book read to me was in school, but typically you're reading this book to the teacher. You're all taking turns or whatever it be, or you're reading it for an assignment. And so I think we both agree, my wife and I, that might have been the reason why even today, like, I don't read books, I don't listen to books. For me to have enjoyment with something, I have to visually see it, because my brain can't make the connection sometimes with, let's say a castle, and then me visually seeing a castle and exploring that castle through the, word by word on the book or screen.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. That it boils down to preference, or maybe, like you said, how you were raised. Because I think I was read to when I was younger, but I don't remember. It's been 40. It's been 40 years.
You read comics though, right? Growing up.
I did read comics. I wasn't a huge comic person, but I still read them.
Yes, yeah, I didn't. No comics.
Being a fan of anime, I read manga.
Yeah.
And even that, every now and then, I would read an actual book, to the point that to this day now I would say I read more books today than I did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, because a lot of anime is based off of light novels and other novels, and a lot of the times you'll watch an anime, for example, and it'll tell you a piece of the story, but it won't tell you the whole story, and it'll definitely cut things out. And then you go back and you read the story, the book about the anime, and you find out there's a whole bunch of character development that was skipped or pushed through or rushed through or cut. And then obviously, if the anime goes, I don't know, 12 episodes, and then it ends and it doesn't get guaranteed for another season, you're like, usually they stop at a point that has just enough of a conclusion that's like, okay, cool, but I want more. And that's usually when you would turn to the books, and that's become a big thing here even in America now, where even light novels, because it used to be just manga. You used to only be able to get your hands on manga, or graphic novels, as they call them, because no one knew that they were called manga for the longest time. And slowly, light novels have been starting to get translated over. So now I'm reading more light novels than I am reading manga. So I'm reading the actual stories more than I'm looking at the quote-unquote picture books.
I used to like the books where you would read up to a part, and it's like, okay, well, if you want to go with this part of the story, turn to page whatever, and then continue the story from that point.
Yep, choose your own adventures were great, and that was good for testing. That did help a little bit with creativity. I think a lot of it, though, for me, what also helped is that I wasn't always a gamer. I played with toys more than I did video games. I was a fortunate enough child that I could get a new console if I wanted one, and I would, usually get the new Nintendo. You know, I had the NES, I had the SNES. I think I've had every Nintendo system that's existed. And I would play it to various degrees, but never that immersed compared to playing with my toys, my Transformers, my wrestling action figures, or for a while Ninja Turtles or Power Rangers, and using your imagination to create, you know, with pro wrestling, you know, they have their storylines and their rig, you know, and their, you know, the action is real, but you know who's going to win. It's the same thing with the action figures. So like, oh, I can make an elaborate storyline with this guy and this guy.
Oh,
Same
yeah.
thing with my Transformers. I can have, you know, the epic battle between Optimus and Megatron, and I can do it how I want to and whatnot. That I helped with creativity as well, because I know you said that you were a lot less fortunate growing up and that you didn't really have a lot of toys to play with when you were younger either.
I had I'd have one, let's say like the turtles, you know, if there's 4 turtles, I would have one. That's what.
Yeah.
So I'd have one turtle, I'd have one Power Ranger, I'd have one Mortal Kombat, you know, etc.
Yeah, and I was definitely more fortunate. I grew up more fortunate, so I could have, you know, the 4 turtles and Master Splinter and Casey Jones, and then Shredder and Rocksteady and Bebop, and I had the big the big play set that with the battle station that the bad guys used to live in, with the big giant eyeball.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
forget what the hell the name of the station was, but I had that play set, so I was able to do more elaborate things. So unfortunately, a lot of it might also be the upbringing. If you had a less fortunate upbringing, maybe your imagination was a little more, I don't want to say stunted, that's not the proper word, but you'd had less opportunities to use your imagination compared to someone like me who grew up with toys and other things.
Yeah, like we had the fortunate opportunity to get a whole big tub of Lego toys. And it was all broken down Lego pieces, and there's no instructions, nothing like that, you know. And so my brother and I got to have a whole bunch. There were thousands upon thousands of these pieces, and we got to make things. But I always struggled making something. I always struggled making, you know, a house or a car or whatever the hell I'm trying to make. So I'd end up making just some weird crap that I'd use as a background for, you know, my Ninja Turtles or something.
Yeah, but I mean, that still was expressing your creativity a little bit, or your imagination. But yeah, I definitely think that has something to do with it, and that probably translates into your preference in gaming too. Because since I grew up with more of an imagination, I could probably put myself into a game with lesser graphics, with, you know, more pixelated graphics easier, or just as much as if I had a realistic looking game. Whereas you are probably more grounded in reality, because you didn't have as much of an imagination growing up, because you didn't have as many opportunities. So maybe that's why the realistic graphics work for you better, because you're seeing it. It looks real, so you could visually picture it, because you're living in the real world, and the graphics that you're looking at on the screen look realistic. So there's more of a connection there.
And this is the purpose of this podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We've gone from a very simple conversation about pixel graphics versus realistic graphics, and then going deep down into the psychology of gaming in general. And that's what we're hoping going forward to continue doing, and putting more emphasis on the behind the scenes of games than the games themselves that play a major part with our upbringing and our continuing growing within our age.
Yeah, and it doesn't just, you know, stop at gaming. There's, you know, comic book series, TV shows, cartoons, toys, movies, all kinds of things that, you know, we will probably cover, you know, bits and pieces of, or have an actual show dedicated to that one subject, so that we don't, you know, go too far off a topic every single episode. So, because like I said, there's going to be an episode in the future where Joe talks more in depth about flight sim, and I'm going to have a show down the road where I talk about VTubers or Transformers or something, so the cool thing is that we're two very different people who've lived two very different lifestyles. So we come in from very different aspects, and most of the time we could still agree on things, but we're adult enough to be like, well, I don't agree with you, but I could see your side of the story, instead of being like, oh no, I don't agree with you, so you're wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's what you see in society nowadays.
We don't need that in this podcast. We don't need that in this world.
We don't need it in the community, it's
two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah, and this is this kind of community needs to be a safe space for people to unwind or get their knowledge, or be with people that share similar opinions or grew up similarly. I can English.
So, speaking of video games, Mark, what is your favorite story in a game? Whether it's a quest, whether it's the overall arc and story, what is your favorite?
So, mine's pretty complicated in the sense that I have multiple. I can't sit down and be like, this is my favorite game of all time ever, whatever. So, Final Fantasy IX, for example, my favorite Final Fantasy. It was more of a romanticized story, whereas there's been some versions of the series that focused more on politics or just stopping the big bad evil. This was more of a romantic tale. Persona 5 tells the tale of young adults growing up in a world being surrounded by corrupted adults and corrupted individuals, and realizing that they can take a stand for it and not just follow the status quo of these people are evil and corrupt, but they're the ones in charge, so we have to live with it. No, these characters in this game were given a power, and they were like, we're going to use this power to do something good with it. And the Yakuza franchise, or I guess it's been renamed the Like a Dragon franchise now, they've had various titles. I believe we're up to, in the mainline series, we just had number 8 come out because Yakuza 7 was technically the first Like a Dragon, and then Infinite Wealth came out this year, was technically Yakuza 8. And they've told very intense stories while mixing some silly side stuff, very over-the-top characters, while also grounding you in reality. The last, I guess you could say the last cutscene, the wrapping up of the story for Like a Dragon, I probably hard sobbed for like a half an hour when it got to that conclusion, and then it hit the credits, and then got to the after credits wrap up stuff. I probably like ugly cried a couple times during that whole thing.
And that's what's amazing about games, is they really can draw you in. You get connected to a story, or to a person and to a world. And when things go a different direction than what your mind's expecting it to, you just lose it,
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. There's a lot of great games out there that tell amazing stories, and sometimes it's not even just the story. It's maybe a character who their voice actor put in this amazing performance that maybe the story itself is not as deep, but the way they portray it is heart-wrenching or enthralling and just grips you, and you're like, holy shit, this is amazing, even if it's not like the deepest thing. So there's a lot of factors that can come into play, whether it be the graphics, the gameplay, the overall story, the way it's told, the way it's voice acted, just everything. The music, even music, you have the right score.
Music plays a huge role.
You have the right score at the right moment in the right scene. Oh, like, whew.
And yeah, music's huge. For me, like I can't think of a particular overall story that I feel is my favorite, so I broke it down to an individual quest. And I'm not going to spoil anything because Mark and I we talked about it prior to starting the podcast, and then we decided, well, we should probably start the podcast because what we're actually talking about is really good for the podcast. But
Hmm.
and that is for me the Witcher 3 quest of the Bloody Baron. It is one
Oh
of
yeah.
the deepest, most complex quests I've ever played in a single game.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and of course, it does have the realistic graphics, but if you get really involved with the character of Geralt, you start having these feelings to find of what's her name? What's shoot
Yennefer.
Ciri? Trying to
Oh,
find
Siri.
Ciri,
Yes. Yes.
yeah. And as you go through the Red Baron quest, and I'm not going to spoil anything because there are definitely people who have not played it yet, and if you haven't, shame on you because The Witcher 3 is one of the greatest games on earth. Period.
Hmm.
But when you get to this quest, it's one of the coolest quests because it has so many different endings that can happen and so many things that can play out for the overarching story of it. But it's got drama, it's got comedy, and it has horror in it too. So it's a really good quest, and once you complete the quest, you're like, wow, okay, so yeah, that happened, and it's always stuck with me, even all these years later after playing The Witcher 3.
Oh yeah. When I think about The Witcher 3, and even if I don't think about just the Geralt himself, or if I try and remember one big aspect of The Witcher 3, the Bloody Baron always comes up in my mind. Is there's so many memorable things about that game, and the Bloody Baron standing out as just a particular story quest slash arc, and it standing out in a game filled with amazing things tells you all you need to know in that sense of like the story starts fairly simplistic. I'm obviously not going to spoil anything and get too deep into it, but you get a quest to do a thing, and on the road to doing the quest, it branches, and you could take multiple different paths. Some of them can end relatively well, and some of them can be downright tragic. And
Hmm.
that's the beauty of The Witcher. That's the beauty of that kind of gaming in general.
Yeah, agreed. And so it's a good episode so far. We have one more topic to cover, and we haven't had a rant yet, which is quite surprising. Being on episode 4 here, I think our episode. What are we on? Episode 4.
Yep, episode 4.
Yeah, we haven't. I think it's the only episode so far that Mark hasn't gone on a major rant about anything.
I
So
don't. I don't go on a rant every episode. I told you, like, if I went on a rant every episode, then they wouldn't be special. I gotta save my ammunition.
well, let's talk about our favorite game controllers. And I know this is a hot topic within the PC community because there are those PC gamers who are anti-controller, and then there are those PC gamers who say, "I don't give a crap. I'm just gonna play whatever feels best for the game." And then there are
Hmm.
those who are like, "Nope, I'm still sticking with the controller because that's what I like."
No, yeah, and there's no wrong answer. The only time it becomes wrong is if you become a pain in the ass about it.
Yeah, agreed.
I prefer mouse and keyboard, but I have no problem picking up a controller if the game feels better being played with a controller. Like, for example, the Yakuza Like a Dragon franchise usually feels better with a controller. I know people who prefer to play roguelites like Hades with a controller. I prefer mouse and keyboard, but I can also understand why people like the controller. So it really just depends on the game and the person.
When my first gaming outside of like playing with a Super Nintendo was really on a PC, and so I was mouse and
Mhm.
keyboard from the get go. And when I started playing, which would have been Animal Crossing, my first console I ever personally owned and bought, the GameCube, it took me a hell of a long time to get used to a controller within the Nintendo cycle there. And
it's funny.
then I
It's
got
funny you say that because the GameCube controller, especially in the fighting game community, is one of the most beloved controllers of all time.
oh, it's fantastic. It is a great controller. So it's a great first step for me when it came to controllers. And then I got into a PS2, and that controller was so much different in terms of the control types from the GameCube to the PS2. And that took me a hell of a long time. I never ever got comfortable with the PS2 controller. Even to this day, I hate that controller with a passion. I never got it. It's like those people who have so much hatred for the original Xbox controller.
Oh, that's interesting though. I didn't know that you hated it. I like the PlayStation controller quite a bit. I just don't like the connectivity to the PC.
When
They
when they switched the things up with the PS4 controller,
Mhm.
it became the perfect controller for me.
Really, because it didn't change that much.
It had just enough
PS3
things.
to PS4.
Yeah. They added like the triggers are a little bit different. They're more like the Xbox style versus just a square or rectangle. Um, I think they added the little dip in the controller like the Xbox has had for a long time. So they took a couple things from the Xbox, just like Xbox taking a couple things from PlayStation. And I feel
Yeah.
like even now, like the DualSense even took it even a further step, even better. Like if I had a choice between my Xbox Elite controller and the DualSense, I pick the DualSense any day of the week. But as you said, the connectivity, there isn't a dongle
Is
to connect it
ass.
to the PC. It's all Bluetooth, and we know how Bluetooth works with controllers. They can and cannot work sometimes.
That is why I don't use my favorite controller of all time for the PC because the connectivity can be very wonky. I love the Switch Pro controller. It was the only accessory that I bought when the Switch came out, other than another set of Joy-Cons, because I always liked having an extra set of controllers because children, possible losing them, especially with the Joy-Cons being a small. But yeah, PlayStation and Nintendo don't play well with PC for some reason. So I go to the Xbox, the wireless Xbox controller. I can just plug the USB into my USB port, plug it into the controller. Controller is recognized. Controller work. I play game. I happy.
And now I'm going to go on a rant. This is going to be Joe's rant now. People are going to, we need to get like a rant button. You know, when we go on a rant, it's
Rant alert! Rant alert!
Yeah. People will say you can just plug in your controller to a USB port and use it as a wired controller. We are in the year 2024. F that crap. F that crap. I want to use a controller. I want to use it wirelessly because that's what I prefer. And as you said, Sony hasn't released a dongle yet. Nintendo hasn't released a dongle. I know there's like third-party ones you can buy that essentially just make it a USB dongle, Bluetooth dongle that's USB. What the hell's the purpose in that? I want the 2.4 gig, like the Xbox dongle does, like my headset is. It's not Bluetooth. Just better for latency.
So, quick interruption before you go on the full-on rant. My Xbox controller has to be plugged into work because I have the regular ass Xbox controller, but I think it's the Elite controller is the one that I think you can just plug it. You can plug in like a dongle and it works better.
No, you can do it with a regular one too. I had my my wife has a regular.
I guess I just don't have Bluetooth something installed on my computer then. I'd have to go and look into it because I know if I try and use my Xbox controller right now as it is not plugged in, it's not going to work. I have to plug it in to the USB port. And I knew that you should have been able to. I guess I just never took that extra step.
Well, so your adapter might be a USB dongle then.
Yeah.
So that would explain that.
But it's a long cord because it's also the charging cable.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So because it's not even a USB. It's not even a USB-C. It's the micro. I think weren't they called micro USB?
Yeah.
So it's a micro USB.
But But okay, so then also to continue the rant, people will say that, oh, well, you can get your PlayStation or your Nintendo controller to work better if you use the hell is it called? There's another third-party program you can get that you can customize all the buttons and all that jazz. I don't remember what it's called right now, but
I know which one you're talking about. It's a pain in the ass because your time is valuable, and
I
sitting
want to
there
just fucking play my game.
yeah, exactly. Spending an hour to program every individual button to make sure it does exactly what you needed to do just for the base gameplay is not intuitive.
And to continue my rant, since I'm on the topic of buttons, all right. If you are watching this podcast, you've heard I'm a Flight Sim fan. The new Flight Sim comes out and probably is out by the time this podcast is posted. But in the new version of Flight Sim 2024, you are not able to import your current control settings to 2024. And so I'm going to spend the first hour probably on the day it's released simply getting my buttons to be the way they currently are in 2020. And that pisses me off.
Yeah, that's not smart design.
Now I know they changed their whole design and they have a reason for the whole thing, but it's just like, come on now, that's an oversight. There are people who have many controls and buttons and switches they like. Just hit a button where you can transfer that shit over. All right, end of rant. I'm done with my rant.
That's tame. You ain't ranted like I've ranted. Don't get me going on something big. Wait till we start getting into topics like Transformers or VTubers, for example. Where
Transformers is a bunch of crap, anyways.
See, I know you're goading me, but you see, Silent Mark is much scarier than Loud Mark. Just like silent but deadly. Well, that's why. Going back to controllers, the only other thing I would add, I really loved the Sega Dreamcast when it was out. I thought the controller was ass. It was big, it was bulky, it had that slot to put like the memory card in. It's
like a Digimon slot. You get little pictures on there.
Exactly. It was like controller Digivolve 2 giant cramp in my hand, man. Just like the original Xbox controller, that big massive fucking piece of plastic. Like, I know why people hated it, and I think it's valid. I think for playability, most people these days go with the Xbox controller because it's just pretty much plug and play.
Accessibility is a big thing with the 360 controller. Like we're talking about 360. We're not talking about the Xbox X whatever else controller. We're not about the Elite. We're talking about just the old school 360 controller.
Yeah, because the base controller it works for all of them.
Yeah, it's a fantastic controller. The one thing that Microsoft's done really well is they didn't abandon the PC market. They embraced the PC market, and they want to make sure their add-ons, for the most part, will work on the PC. Obviously, there's certain things that didn't because they were only exclusive for that hardware, which makes sense. But something like a controller, a headset, they want to make sure they are cross-play, cross-usability.
And it feels good. Like, I will say this, like, I'm holding the controller in my hand right now. I don't have big hands, but I wouldn't say I have small hands either. I think I just have average size hands. But I think anyone...
Yeah, people have said that, like, bigger hands, smaller hands, like, it fits really good. Like, they just did a really good design with it.
Like, I easily can fit both thumbs on both joysticks. I can, shift my thumb down to the directional pad. I can hit the pause and select type buttons. The triggers are all within range. Everything's where it should be, within quick reflex button pressing ability. Me personally, you can't really ask for much more. It doesn't need to be super duper fancy. I don't know why. I wish I could explain to you why I like the Pro Controller over any of the others. There's something just about how it feels in my hands, and that's what it boils down to. No, the Nintendo Pro? The Nintendo Pro Controller.
It's light. It's a light controller.
It's a very light controller, and much like the Xbox controller, everything is where it needs to be. You can get to it quickly, and I think maybe that's why I do like it better than the Xbox, because the Xbox controller, at least the one I'm holding, takes batteries in the back still, so you do have a little bit of more heft because of the batteries, whereas the Switch Pro controller doesn't, and maybe that's the small little thing that fixes it. I personally still like the PlayStation controllers, but to be fair, I played way more PlayStation than I did Xbox, so I did get the feel for it more.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of it just depends on your hands, like how it feels in your hands. There's no like, this controller is probably not better than that controller when it comes to the feel of it. But like you've established, and like I've said, our time's valuable. We don't want to spend an hour trying to get the controller to work and play how it should to play the game. Plug and play in 2024 is not a hard ask.
No.
And everything should have that.
And so I'm going to touch on a couple things real quick. So I have the Elite controller, the Xbox Elite controller. I do have the Pro Nintendo as well. My wife has a 360 controller. And the reason why I bought the Elite controller is because the Elite has a little bit of rubber grip on it. And I like that feel. It kind of, after a session of intense gaming, you don't feel like your hand's sweaty. I love that you can change out a couple pieces to customize it to your best preference. Like the dips a little bit differently.
I was going to mention that that's one of the reasons why the Elite is so much more highly regarded, is the fact that you can, even if it's just a minor adjustments, the fact that you can make a minor adjustment like that is big. It makes it worth the $100 or 100, and I think the newer Elite, the Elite 2.0 is like 120 now. Maybe I don't remember. It's not 150, right? It's 120
about that. Yeah, somewhere in that price range.
Yeah, whereas the Switch Pro controller is like 80 or 89.99. To have it be just a basic controller, yes, it feels good. Yes, it's lighter. It's still like $80 to $90 for that thing.
Yeah. Well, the price of the controllers have gone up as well, because even like the Dual Switch, when that came out, or not Dual Switch, the Dual Sense, when that came out, 3 years ago, that was a $70 controller. And that's just a base controller for the PlayStation 5. When I bought it, I don't know what it is now. It's probably more.
I think you can get, and that's why I think also Xbox has the market on controllers too, because I could walk into Target and get one for like $60 on sale. Walmart always has some of them on sale. I think right now they're like $45. They're still cheaper. They're $70, which I think is still about $10 cheaper than most of the other ones. So, and then there's such a wide variety of colors.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Like, you really underestimate how much like a nice looking controller sometimes adds to your enjoyment. It doesn't change the game. It doesn't affect anything other than your own aesthetic. And if you have a theme, if you like the color green,
It's funny you say that, because my setup, my computer setup here, I have a white case, because I've really gone to this everything white. I have a white keyboard, I have a white mouse, I have a white monitor. My PlayStation DualSense is white. My Xbox is black, because I couldn't found a white Elite. There's no white Elite one. But yeah, so I hear what you're saying with the look and feel. Yeah.
Are you sure? Because I see an Elite Series 2 core controller on Amazon. It's $106, but it's got mostly white with some black.
The Elite 1 didn't have white.
Okay.
Yeah. So PlayStation released a Pro version of their controller, a DualSense Pro, and it's really cool. They took a lot of the same features that Microsoft has done with the Elite version, with one exception. It's only Bluetooth. There's no dongle.
Yeah.
And there's some features that are only exclusive to the PlayStation. And I was really excited about getting that controller, because I remember when Assassin's Creed Valhalla came out a few years back, and I played some really long sessions with it, with my Elite controller. And my hands started cramping up, because I must be getting arthritis early on here. I switched over to the DualSense. No pain whatsoever. No pain whatsoever. I was able to play the exact same amount of hours and not feel any fatigue in my hands at all. So I know when I have long sessions of gaming, I want to switch over to my DualSense for those kind of games. And I would love to have bought the Pro version because it has some of the things I really, really like of the Elite version, but I don't want to get one that's only Bluetooth and no dongle.
No, and I totally understand that. I think there's a lot that goes into it. The way it feels, the way long sessions, color, all of that. I personally I love the color purple, and both PlayStation and Xbox give you nice variations of that. Nintendo unfortunately doesn't. You have to get them through. I think I don't know if they're officially licensed by Nintendo, but I know that they have a lot of Nintendo branding. I think it's called Power A.
Oh yeah,
and
that's
they
a good
do
brand,
a lot
though.
of. Is it? I've never really used it. I've always preferred to just buy the brand version because of the past. Like when I was younger, and you had to buy like Mad Cats or one of those brands, and you would always get like your hit and miss. So I always stuck with the full on regular brand because of that. So I've never really dabbled in Power A, but I know that if I want a Pro controller like controller with it being like themed or multicolored, that I have to go that route. Nintendo only puts out the base black version.
Also, to your point about the Elite White version, there is Elite White. However, it's a core version only, so it only comes with a controller and a cord and one extra thumbstick tool. Where the full setup that's only black, comes with the charging station, more pads, more thumbsticks, D-pad, carrying case, etc. Everything I have for the Elite 1 setup. So I wonder if the Pro 2 works in the Elite 1 charging case. It's the same controller, so it should. I'll have to research.
Xbox Elite Series 2 core wireless gaming controller, white, and it's mostly white with some black, and it's got like the rubber grips.
But it's only.
But it does say it's core. It does say it's core.
So you don't get all the other bells and whistles. It is also $50 cheaper.
Yeah, but it might plug. I mean, a lot of them don't they just use USB-C now?
Well, yeah, I'm talking about the charging case though. Because when I'm done, I can just drop it in a case. But I'm looking at the back of the controller. It doesn't look like it has the same charging.
Yeah, that's probably why they make it cheaper. Is because it probably doesn't fit in there. I'm trying to look at it too.
It's nice looking. I like it, but yeah, it doesn't look like, because on the Series 1, the charging thing's at the top of the case, and the white one doesn't have little magnet strips pieces to charge it there.
I wonder why. I wonder.
They want you to buy more crap. That's all that is.
That's fair.
But I suppose that's not great to talk about on the podcast, other geeky nerd stuff. Although maybe it is. Maybe people are interested.
Yeah, that would be something for the comment section. Any listeners, if there's something that you want to hear us talk about more, feel free to, comment and say, I would like to hear a theme. I'd like to hear about this particular theme, or no, please go into more nerdy shit. Like, just something to throw out there for anyone listening that, we will probably check, we will check the comments.
Oh, absolutely.
And people have recommendations where we're not against it, because a lot of the times we pick our themes for these shows based on how we're feeling at the time and what feels the most prominent to talk about, or what we're just in the mood to talk about. So, we can be convinced. I take bribes.
Actually, you know what? Now that I look at it, it looks like it does fit. Huh. Anywho.
Well, that's good then.
Yeah. Anything to add to this episode, Mark?
No. As always, as I always say at the end, just thank you if you take the time to click on this episode and listen to it. We appreciate it, and we would love for people to comment, just to have an opinion about what we talk about, and if they have anything they want to add, it'd be great. But otherwise, just thank you for listening.
Yeah, as always. Yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you for the next episode. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.